Over the course of many years of helping nonprofits, we have found that the public support test is among the least understood topics, especially by smaller organizations. But it is absolutely critical to understand how the public support test works and how it impacts your charitable organization, lest your nonprofit lose its public charity status altogether. My name is Greg McRae, founder and CEO of Foundation Group, and welcome to 501c3 University. Before we get into the specifics of the public support test, it's helpful to step back a bit and talk about a subject we've covered before: private foundations versus public charities. Both organizational types are considered tax-exempt 501c3 nonprofits, but the requirements regarding donor support are quite different. Private foundations are typically closely governed nonprofits, and the purpose of most private foundations is to fund the work of public charities. In addition to being allowed to have close control, private foundations can also be closely funded, even by just one individual. Well, many family foundations are governed and funded by members of a single family. A public charity, on the other hand, these are the feet-on-the-street nonprofits that are actually conducting charitable projects. They're expected to have both broad control and diverse funding. On the control side, the IRS expects charity boards to have a majority of members who are unrelated by blood, marriage, or outside business ownership. As for funding sources, charities are required to have a broad base of public support, which is where the public support test comes in. The simplest definition of the IRS public support test states that at least 1/3, or 33.3%, of donations must be given by donors who give less than 2% of the nonprofit's overall gift receipts. Exceptions to the 2% include any gifts received from other public charities or from a government source, such as a state or federal grant. These count toward public support regardless of how much they are. And for organizations that also get funds from sale of goods or services, something called program revenue, such revenue also counts toward public support. As you might expect with IRS compliance issues, it's much more complicated than it appears. There are several subcategories of 501c3 public charities, including 509A1, 509A2, 509A3, and 509A4. I know, it's a lot, but hang with me. We're only going to focus our discussion on 509A1 and A2 because those two subcategories address nearly everyone who needs this video. And the reason we're even breaking it down this far is because the public support test is calculated differently depending on your public charity subcategory. When an organization first requests 501c3 status from the IRS, the Form 1023 application asks which subcategory the nonprofit is seeking status under based on its purpose, programs, and revenue sources. Many 509A1 public charities are of a type that is self-defining, and to which the public support test doesn't even apply, namely churches, schools, and charity hospitals. Others falling into 509A1, however, their purpose doesn't fit a predefined category. They are more generically defined by their primary source of revenue, donations and grants. Charities subcategorized under 509A2 also are not predefined by purpose, but rather by revenue. These charities typically have a mix of income sources, including donations, sales of goods or services, program revenue, and maybe even investment income. I know what you're thinking. How am I ever going to make sense of this? And why does the IRS make all of this so complicated? Believe it or not, it's really not quite as bad as it sounds. Plus, the IRS public support test is calculated over a 5-year average, and the IRS doesn't require a public charity to pass the public support test until year 6 of its existence, meaning new nonprofits have time to raise a broad base of support. Let's consider some examples. ABC Charity is a 509A1 public charity that receives substantially all of its support from donations from individuals, families, and businesses. Here's how the numbers break out. Assuming the organization brought in exactly $1 million in cumulative donations over the past 5 years, and at least $333,333 of it must have come from donors giving less than $20,000 each over that time period in order to pass the test. Well, let's see how ABC Charity did. ABC had total donor support of $1 million. $882,000 of it came from donors who gave less than 2% of the $1 million total. leaving $118,000 coming from larger individual donors. That equals a public support percentage of 88.2%. Good news for them. Let's mix it up a bit. Let's say ABC Charity receives donations not only from the public, but also from other public charities. In this case, let's assume the same $1 million in total gifts received. However, $425,000 came from large donors who gave more than 2% of the total, $425,000 came from another public charity, and $115,000 came from individual donors who gave less than 2% of the total. In this case, the public support test is a little more complicated. The first $425,000 is given by less than 2% givers, so that's a 42.5% of it that is not public support. The second $425,000 was given by another qualifying public charity, so that's another 42.5% that is public support. And the $115,000 remaining in the calculation came from under 2% givers, so that's another 11.5% public support, for a total of $540,000 or 54%. Yay, they pass again. Let's throw another wrench into this. Instead of the second $425,000 coming from a public charity, let's say it came from a private foundation. All the other numbers stay the same. This time, the only public support is the $115,000 from less than 2% givers, for a total public support percentage of 11.5% for the 5 years. Uh-oh, looks like ABC failed the test. XYZ nonprofit situation is a bit different from ABC's. While XYZ, a children's dance school, gladly accepts donations, it also receives part of its revenue from participation fees and from selling tickets to its performances. As such, it is classified as a 509A2. Let's see how their numbers work. Again, let's say total revenue is $1 million over 5 years. Participation fees equal $760,000. Ticket sales equal $80,000. Donor support from under 2% givers is $60,000. And donations from over 2% givers equaled $100,000 of support. XYZ's resulting public support percentage is 90%, way beyond the required minimum of 33.3%. There are countless ways we could structure these scenarios, but this sampling gives you an idea of how complex this can be. Unfortunately, this conversation wouldn't be complete unless we talk about what happens when a charity fails the public support test. Failing the test is a serious matter, and it could result in your nonprofit losing public charity status and being reverted to a private foundation. For many nonprofits, that could be a devastating outcome. Now, private foundation status by itself isn't a bad thing. It's ideal for those organizations that specifically need that structure. But for charities that find themselves downgraded, the consequences include having to file Form 990-PF each year, regardless of income, plus the addition of excise taxes not charged to public charities. Even worse, the organization cannot regain public charity status for at least another 5 years. So, if your nonprofit fails the public support test, is this reversion to private foundation status automatic? Fortunately, it is not. It may still be possible to retain public charity status so long as your public support test result is at least 10%. When that happens, charities can fall back on what's called the facts and circumstances test. This is a subjective request that's made on Form 990, asking the IRS to allow the organization to retain public charity status. The organization must assert that it is operating as a public charity, not a foundation, and that they are actively working to get their public support percentage back to the 33% or more. There's no guarantee that the IRS will grant the request, but typically they do if the situation seems reasonable. Also, it is entirely possible to fall into the situation multiple years in a row, but it's not a situation we would want to be in if you can help it. There's also another loophole that can help you retain public charity status. If you pass the public support test in any given year, that also counts for the following year automatically. That means that even if you fail in any given year, particularly if you went below the 10% of the facts and circumstances test, you won't lose your public charity status immediately. If you fail the next year too, you will be reverted to private foundation. If you pass the next year, you should be good to go. I think by now you probably understand why I say that the public support test is very misunderstood. Frankly, it can be very confusing, but it is a critical part of maintaining the public charity status your nonprofit needs. Understand how it works, keep great records, and work hard to ensure your charity has at least 33% public support. And as always, if your nonprofit needs help with startup or compliance needs, think of us first. You can visit Foundation Group on the web at 501c3.org. If you liked this video, be sure and click the like button. It helps us out a ton. If you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button and click the little bell icon to stay notified of new videos. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.